2 years ago, when I was busy preparing for the Tarsa Mishpacha event, in the middle of all the action, Rabbi Reichik sent me an urgent message. He heard that a woman missed one of the classes because she didn't know about the event, and I was determined that it would never happen again. He cared that no lady misses the event by not knowing. He asked me to call Rabbi Levin, Rabbi Kesselman, and Rabbi Zions and make sure they send the flyer to their shul mailing. Devar Leah, what you're doing is amazing, and men also need to be inspired. And that initiated a review of Tarsa Mishpacha for men because he said it's important for us to be a team, husband and wife, reviewing the laws. We are dedicating the 3 classes this year to our dear beloved Rabbi Reichik, the Rav of Los Angeles. May this bring his neshama and aliyah and bring Mashiach now. Rabbi Reichik was such a caring person. For me, he was more than a Rav. He was like a caring father. He didn't only care for our ruchnias, but also our gashmias. Personally, he would call my husband and ask, "How is your parnasa doing?" Just like his father, alav shalom, used to do to others. He always cared for our lechem, our matzah. Before Pesach, he would sell matzah at cost price. And 2 years ago, shortly before Pesach, Rabbi Reichik messaged me to make sure we have everything for Pesach. I said, "Rabbi Reichik, you're a tzaddik." And his response was, "I just want to be a chassid. For me, that's enough. I don't need to be a tzaddik." So if you look on the flyer below, it says Hara HaChassid, and then Rabbi Shimon, because his whole life was a chassid, a chesed, kindness through and through. Rabbi Reichik would always send me and the whole shul mailing a broadcast through WhatsApp to elevate WhatsApp for Torah. And one week he sent, and it really is pertinent to the theme tonight. Don't worry so much about business. The more bitachon, more parnasa. If you look at your chairs, there it says Mimerchak Tavi Lachma, and there's a treasure chest with chocolate coins and jewels. Why? The wealth of parnasa of our husband is in the schus of the wife. The woman brings the blessing to our home. I remember hearing from Mrs. Rebbetzin Esther Pekarsky a beautiful vart from Ashes Chayil that inspired the theme of tonight. Mimerchak Tavi Lachma. She brings bread from afar. The word mimerchak is the same root word as Harchakos. That by us being careful in the laws of Tarsa Mishpacha, we bring the lechem, the wealth, the parnasa. Our husband's wealth and riches is in our hands. We learn a powerful lesson from this. When we women are careful about Harchakos, we bring our husband lechem, bread, which represents sustenance and parnasa. So we women are empowered to make the right choices and be careful. Yes, it might be inconvenient to put the baby down and then say, here, take the baby. And yes, I remember my kid saying, "Mommy," I asked my husband for money and he put it down. And he actually asked my kid, "Give this to Mommy." And my child said, "Mommy's right here. Why are you asking me to pass, when she's standing right there?" And Hashem put the words in my mouth. I said, it's one of the 10 commandments is to honor your parents. I'm giving you a chance to do kibbud avayim. And that worked, Baruch Hashem. Wait till a few years from now when they learn Chassid and Kala classes and they'll be, I remember that. Okay, what? So tonight, let us continue the legacy of Rabbi Reichik by valuing the Gashmias and the Ruchnias of our family. Ladies, the power is in our hands. Also, I want to dedicate tonight to a very special person who is like my Yiddish mama, Mrs. Helen Levy, Aleha Shalom. I was very close to her, and she passed away, and her yahrzeit was just 2 weeks ago. When she was in her 70s, my special mother and role model, who taught us by example to inspire women to Tarsa Mishpacha, encouraged Mrs. Levy to go to the mikvah for her first time. She and her husband never kept Tarsa Mishpacha, and my mother said it's never too late. Going to the mikvah can have a retroactive effect on her marriage and bring brachas to her children. and even grandchildren many years later. She obviously passed menopause, but of course, being the God-fearing woman that she was, she agreed. She said to my mother, Rachel, I will only go if you come with me. My mother, of course, seized the opportunity and on a Motzei Shabbos left her 8 Kinderlach to go get a babysitter and take Mrs. Levy to the mikvah. My mother was waiting for a long time and she wasn't coming out. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and my mother's mind was racing. What is going on? The mikvah lady came to my mother and said, why didn't you tell her to remove her dentures? She got titled twice because that's why it took so long. My mother always taught kalas, so this was something new. She realized that she has to teach when she teaches someone in their 70s. She forgot to take out her dentures because it's considered a chatzitza, like contact lenses. So my mother learned from this incident to ask older women if they have dentures to remove it for tefillah. When my mother drove her home, she said, this was the best experience in my life. It was the greatest pleasure, and she was thrilled. And in tears, she told my mother, I will never forget what you did for me. She started going every year, Erev Yom Kippur, with my mother, and until she wasn't able to go anymore. I just heard the story from my mother for her first yahrzeit, and I got permission from her family and from my mother to share. And I wanted to let you know that you can inspire other women. And even if they pass menopause, they have that power of having the retroactive effect of brachas, of mimerchak tavi lachma, having a lot of bracha. I'm gonna do thank yous later on, but we have a lot of thank yous. I'll do it by the raffle in Hashem. And before I give the mic to our amazing speaker, I want to thank the husband behind it all, because if not for my husband, I would not be able to do it. Everything, unity is you before I. Team, there's no you, there's no I. Thank you, Ramon. Hashem Shabbat with all the brachos. Agudai, thank you for being my partner and bringing Mashiach now. And we're very lucky. This Friday is actually,
Yeah.
One of the women, one of the Rebbetzins in our community who was always part of the Harchakos Mishpacha committee beginning years and years ago was the esteemed Rebbetzin Sarachal Shachar, whose yahrzeit is actually this Friday. So such a nachas, of course, Chapen Shemayim, as her legacy continues, and her amazing daughter, Rebbetzin Hadassa Spalter, is here with us tonight to share with us the first part of Nida and Harchakos. One of the things just that Rolei was mentioning of Nimerchak Tavilachma actually inspired me. One little thing to say is that the Rebbe said in so many letters, not only Taras Mishpacha, but one of the Harchakos that we do in our homes, of course, is covering our hair. But really, this is something that is not only a halacha of Taras Mishpacha, it's a halacha and it's a means of being connected to our Nasi Adar. Because the Rebbe so many times stressed that the brachas of Parnasa and everything good comes through this mitzvah of Shekel. So Yesher Kayach to everybody who is keeping this mitzvah, you should feel every moment that you're wearing your Shekel and that you're covering your hair, that you are making another connection to our Maish Rabbeinu, to our Rebbe.
Okay, so thank you, Kula and Rolei. You're both beyond inspiring year after year and the amounts of work that you do. Is Rolei not even in the room?
She's her baby, probably.
Okay, so we're being here with Rolei, and it's hard to say no to her. I think you've both been asking me a number of things a number of different times. And when she asked me, there was a lot going on from a few different directions, but my first thing was like, you know what, there's also schos. And whatever, it was a certain challenge, and I was like, it'll be a schos. And little did I realize, not even looking at the calendar, that it's my mother's yahrzeit this week. So for me, that's amazing. But even more than that, not even more, I should say that my mother's person. I'm happy I can do this in the week of the yahrzeit and make her proud. But I know you're very close to Chaya. You were. Sorry, still be nonstop. I always like look for her energy for this time. Like I said, it was a super challenge that was going on. Baruch Hashem, everything's fine. Connected with all this. And to get like regards from this past Shabbos from somebody, like I always say, I heard every story from the world. There's nothing else. But I always hope against hope. Maybe I'll still hear more. I get a new story, a new picture, meet somebody else who knew her that I didn't know. Whatever, somebody that was her counter at the kiddos was at a Shabbos column, gave me a bunch of news stories, told me how much sugar she ate. I'm like, great, whatever makes her happy. How much sugar did she eat? What other parent usually wants to hear that? And then this morning, my brother, not whenever he takes people near to Israel, he always sends me a picture. Posted this morning, a new picture of girls at her kever. I was like, thank you, Kaya. So I'm sorry to start off a little emotional, but just feel like everything's interconnected. Sorry about that emotional part. I wasn't even planning it, but and I guess it kind of makes sense. I mean, maybe ladies probably from Nida too. I don't know. Okay, we'll get into that. Anyway, I know that's such a good joke. You know, you're just like teaching it. So becoming Nida, what is this? What are we talking about here tonight? So the Rebbe mentioned that the Rebbe mentions many times, as both mentioned, the importance of married couples reviewing the laws and reviewing the laws, because over time we can forget certain aspects of it. And there are countless letters where the Rebbe talks about tremendous brachos, as you said, that come through observing the halachas properly. And therefore it's important to review, and many try every single year. And many times people would write into the Rebbe about issues that they had, and it doesn't just mean about fertility, it does not just about children, it affects every single aspect of their life. That's how powerful this is. It's the cornerstone of Jewish life, it's everything. And they would discuss what they were having shalom bias issues, harmony, things with children, nachas with children, parnasa, whatever area was, the Rebbe would respond again and again, please make sure to review and to be more meticulous with the laws of Harchakos and Mishpacha. Nobody's saying that there is an intentional reason when someone's not being so careful in a specific little detail. Sometimes it's a lack of awareness. You didn't learn it, you don't know it. And we forget, we're human, we forget certain details, and hence the importance of a review. And there's so many stories, like I'm just doing even Harchakos, but like I had so many beautiful stories connected with mikvah, bedikas, intimacy class, so many different areas, so many different inyanim, where every single detail counted, and there's these amazing stories. One extra bedika, people that were lax with a certain bedika, because I'm not doing bedika class, I don't want to get into all that now. But I did the first one in the morning, things like that. And when they were told to continue these areas and to be careful with every detail, unbelievable, whatever they were diving for and hoping for, worked out. So every detail counts. It's not like the bigger picture I keep. There's no detail that's too much for the Eibishter. It's everything. You get schar for every little effort that you do. So, you know, whether it's, like I said, a bedika, or whether it's something in the calendar that might seem a little complicated, every little harchaka that we're going to mention, like putting a hecker on the table, well, maybe I'm good with not passing or anything else, I keep forgetting about that. It's not a thing, I know I'm Nida anyway. Every little effort, there's no effort that is too great or too small. In the Eibishter, everything is effort, and you don't know at what point you're tipping a scale for you to get a certain gruff in a certain area of life, because that specific thing, you're a little lax. It could be the simplest thing. But in the Eibishter's eyes, that effort in that specific area is can be everything. There are a lot of, depending on the age that you're at in life, many people feel that maybe they're on pills, maybe they're on an IUD, and hence they hold back their periods at a certain stage for many years already. But the Rebbe still felt that until you actually go through menopause, you're still in the category of one who's sure of your Taras and Shvacha, because first of all, the body changes and different things happen at any given time, even with being on a pill, even with being an IUD, whatever it is that people are on, all of a sudden, I mean, things go on. Things happen out of the blue, and it should always be within the normal range, and that's okay. Normal things happen. There's perimenopause years, the years before, and all of a sudden something came up and you thought you were scot-free, you're done. So the point is to keep reviewing your until, and there's still one of the first goes after menopause as well, but in terms of, it doesn't apply to me anymore until you actually go through menopause, because even if you're actively holding it back, it's not, it does apply. Because the body changes, different situations have come up many times for people. And as they said, the Rebbe would tell people that if they're careful with separation when they need to, as we know the famous answer, that will result in them being close when they're supposed to be close. And one of the beautiful components of Taras Mishpacha is that it perpetuates further observance of Taras Mishpacha. How? As the Rebbe explained, by a couple fulfilling the mitzvah properly, they bring down the shamas that are healthy and pure, and those children will then also live upstanding lives, being meticulous in the mitzvah of Taras Mishpacha, which will then bring down the next generation of pure and healthy souls, and the cycle continues. As I think was mentioned earlier, that it's never too late to become more observant and to increase in this mitzvah. There's no such thing as, but I learned to do this, so I never knew that. It doesn't matter for me. It's never too late. At any point in our age, and at any point in our life, we can increase a little bit in any area that we feel we're not so maybe machmirin, or being as careful in, or a little lax in. It's never too late. It's like we heard before, it's even written that someone who's been married with children and has already children for many years, it can still retroactively affect and elevate the children's neshamas and whatever other schusim are needed. This is a real proven fact that I would say again and again. Just like it was spoken before about women that didn't go to mikvah and then did, that can retroactively fix for all the times that they didn't. So it's a very powerful, powerful mitzvah. Although this is a mitzvah for the couple as a whole, and both need to be supportive of each other, but by definition, this mitzvah was, by its very nature, given in the hands of the Jewish woman, because she is given into Nida, Tahara, and Tefillah. In other words, she herself knows when her body is Nida, she herself knows when she is Tahara, which is Torah, which is Tztak, and she herself goes into title. By the woman observing this mitzvah carefully, she brings purity and holiness into the home and to the family, and that's why it's still called, though, Taharas HaMishpacha, because not Taharas HaIsha, because it affects the entire family unit. And like we said before, this is the cornerstone of Jewish life. As we know, throughout the ages, Jewish women were always Moser Nefesh, sacrificing tremendously. We have heard so many unbelievable stories over, again, this is not my class to go into many mikvah stories, but just, the stories in Russia, how they would go into frozen lakes all alone at night, nobody with them, just so many of those things. And today we have it so easy with so many beautiful and comfortable mikvahs. We're so blessed to be able to fulfill this mitzvah in such a beautiful and comfortable manner. And there are those out there, maybe outside of the Orthodox world, that have a very simplistic view of the concept of Nida, that it's some antiquated, archaic system that Orthodox people follow, like this old-fashioned attitude about women bleeding, that whole concept. And in reality, it's the opposite. We're not saying that women there's anything not good or not nice or negative or bad about them. Family purity is a celebration of life and our most precious human relationships. To understand that, we have to understand a deeper understanding of what purity and impurity are all about. So the Torah teaches us that the source of Tahara, purity, is life itself. On the other hand, death is the source of Tumah, impurity. A lot of Tumahs mentioned in the Torah are connected to death in some form or another. That is the whole concept of Tumah and Tahara by Nida. That every month a woman's body is preparing for the possibility of conception, which is life. Menstruating is then the shedding of that lining, which is the end of that possibility. Meaning the potential life fills the woman's body with holiness and purity. With the departure, that potential impurity sets in. So impurity is not something tangible. It doesn't show anything negative on the woman. It's a spiritual state of being. It's the absence of purity, much as darkness is the absence of light. So it's knowing how to say it. There's nothing negative about it. It's the absence of purity, like darkness is the absence of light. It's a fight, or a folk, depending on how you say your O or your I. Not depending on the Yaakov or Balak, not something we really understand. Nevertheless, the mitzvah is beneficial to us in many ways. So first of all, there's a built-in cycle of closeness and separation. It is very much in harmony with our physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual selves. The Gemara Maseches Nida tells us that the Torah separates the husband and the wife during the time of her impurity in order to make her as desirable to him as their day of their wedding. Only immersion in the mikvah changed the status of a woman, just like in the olden days, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, any type of impurities were followed by immersing in the mikvah to change that status. And it's an amazing concept. This is the only thing that we have in today's day and age where there is no Beis Hamikdash anymore regarding the concept of halachic status change from Tumah to Tahara by a woman going to a mikvah. By a man, it's a minhag. There is no halachic status change to him. We are the only ones that continue to represent this concept from the times of Matan Torah. So when one becomes Nida, she becomes Tameh. until after she immersed in the mikvah, which is a minimum of 12 days, versus a kala, which would be a minimum of 11 days. If you want to redo kala classes, let me know. Unless you go to a period at the same time, that's another story. Now, what makes a woman become Nida? So we're going to go into that. That was just a little bit of an intro. So there's a few different circumstances that render a woman Tameh. Some ways make her Nida Midoraisa from the Torah, and some ways make her Nida Midorabanan, according to the Rabbanan. Whatever way she ends up being Nida, the process for her to become Tahor still remains the same. But when it's Midoraisa, it's more stringent, it's more strict when it comes to certain questions that you may have. So before we get into the specifics of how one becomes Tameh, it's important to remember that while we're covering the basics, there are so many more details and many questions that can come up in life. And you should always be in touch with the Rav. Many have an attitude super uncomfortable. Most, I think, women, their husbands go for them to the Rav. Even for some of you, you're the one that needs to go to the Rav, to remember that it's such a bracha that we have a Rav, that their whole job is that they want to find any possibility they can to keep a husband and wife together, the Torah. And therefore, many cases where people thought they were thought that they were Tameh, that just by going to a Rav, they realized they were not. So hence the importance of having a Rav in your life that you can always go to. So how does a woman become Nida Raisa? The first thing is what's called Hargasha. Hargasha is a feeling of sensation. Now, what we're about to discuss about Hargasha is really not generally applicable to today. Don't all start getting nervous. Oh my gosh, my film Hargasha right now. It's just really to get the full sense of what Hochasi. That's part of Hochasi, but it's something you mentioned because it's Toma Min HaTorah, it's Midoraisa, and it's important to be aware that this concept exists. But it's maybe 1 in a million, maybe 1 in thousands. I don't know who. If someone feels that it might be applying to them, speak to a Rav. We're just going through it. Don't get nervous. It's not really applicable today. So what is Hargasha Min HaTorah? The sensation of the opening of the uterus. The uterus is up there, okay? So we're not talking about down there. The sensation of the opening of the uterus, which causes blood to come out of the uterus, and this is going on inside of her body. B, even if she didn't feel the opening uterus, but she feels the blood coming out of the uterus, that leaves the uterus, that also is a sensation that's going on inside her body. In general, most poskim hold that Hargasha Min HaTorah does not apply today. Like I said, women today are really not in tune with their bodies the way they used to be, where they literally knew the inner workings of their bodies, the sensations, the feelings. But it was much healthier in that aspect. They knew exactly what was Zav and what was Nida. It's just, everything is different today, and we're not them today. So it's a very different time today. Today, what women might generally feel, if they start going, do I feel Hargasha? No, what you generally feel today is natural, much of it comes out of the vaginal area. Generally speaking, if a woman felt this Hargasha, again, because we're going through halachically, what would she have to do? So they would have to do a bedika to determine if there was blood that was discharged or was a natural discharge that would be tahor. Meaning a natural discharge that would be tahor. So if she did a bedika and doesn't discover anything on it other than natural moisture, then she would be tameh out of doubt, because we still know that something came out of her uterus and she cannot ascertain what it was. The same thing would apply if she didn't do a bedika at all. She would be tameh out of doubt. If this happened 3 times, that a woman felt a Hargasha and did a bedika right away, and she found a tahor discharge, then she established for herself that her Hargasha is not associated with tummy blood, and as therefore doesn't need to do bedikas again when she feels this Hargasha. If someone is considered this is still under the same category, if someone is considered a Sulekas Damim, the Sulekas Damim is a woman who is not expected to have a menstrual cycle, which would apply to a pregnant woman after 3 months of pregnancy, a nursing woman up to 24 months, or postmenopause. It's a Sulekas Damim. So even if she was baited, she checked after sensation, she did not find anything, she would be considered tahor because she's in a Sulekas Damim. But as we mentioned, to end this point off again, it's extremely rare for a woman today to feel a proper Hargasha Min HaTorah, and therefore today's day and age, even if she thinks she's one of those women, she felt the discharge, and she did a bedika, and she didn't find anything, she would still be tahor, and even if she didn't do a bedika, she would still be tahor. So that's what we need to say Hargasha Min HaTorah, to go over it so you're aware that this concept exists. If you're one of those million women that's now all of a sudden not sure if you feel something coming out of your uterus, which you're probably not, call your local Rav. Okay, number 2 is obviously her actual period is Nida Oraisa. Number 3, another way of becoming Nida Midoraisa is seeing blood on a bedika cloth, and therefore that would then share the same status as a woman who had her period. Again, this is the bedika cloth has to be properly examined. We're sure that it's clean and had nothing on it prior to bedika. Always you check it before. This is not a class on bedikas, but I'm just mentioning that. If the bedika cloth was possibly not fully clean beforehand, there are questions that need to be discussed with the Rav. Now, what happens when someone didn't do an actual bedika, but she did what's called a kinuach, wiping the area? It was not fully inserted inside like a bedika, but a little bit. Because when people wipe themselves, that's how they do it. So she found a little blood on it. So we're going to go into what happens, but like, you know, the famous rule, never look. It's probably one of the weirdest things that somebody not from or not Jewish would ever hear. Just naturally, people clean themselves. We want to make sure they're clean. It is a crazy training that we need to do, but it's so important, and it will just save you again and again and again. And Rabbanim ask again and again, don't look. So now we're talking about a kinuach. Again, what happens if someone didn't do an actual bedika? What she did again was called the kinuach, which again was called wiping the area. It was not fully inserted like the bedika, but found blood on it. Most poskim hold it would not be tamei midaraisa, only tamei midarabanan, and therefore, if it's found on a colored cloth or material that's not mekabel tuma, some material around mekabel tuma, she would be tahar. However, the opinion of the Alter Rebbe, which is what we go by in Chabad, is that it is similar to a regular bedika, and therefore she would be tamei midaraisa. That is, don't look. But if she only wiped, like in other circles, it would be considered more like a stain, let's just say. So you're aware of that, but that's not what we go by in Chabad. But if she only wiped herself externally and she didn't go internally at all, she could bring it to a Rav to see if he can be made, if he can be lenient in that case. Again, not the most comfortable situation, so try not to look. Nobody wants to bring a tissue. But trust me, if that's the position you're in, bring it and save yourself from being Nida. So again, she only wiped herself externally and didn't go internally at all. She would bring it to a Rav to see if he can be made in that case. If she happened to do a bedika before this wiping, and the bedika was totally fine, and then she wiped herself and you saw blood under the tissue, then it would not have the status of deraisa. It would be derabanan, even according to the Alter Rebbe, because she did a bedika first. In general, like I keep saying again, it's important to never look at the tissue that you use, as hard as it is. And so big training for college as well. It's like, what do you mean never look? It's also important to know that you're not expected to be a Rav. If there's ever a question or you're not sure, don't ever assume that you're tamei, better to ask the Rav. Anytime one is rendered Nida midaraisa, it wouldn't matter how much blood was found, or what color the cloth was, or what kind of cloth it was. Once it's in midaraisa, all those things do not apply. On the other hand, when one finds blood that will make her Nida midarabanan, then the amount of blood, the color of the cloth, the type of cloth would all be relevant to determine if she becomes Nida or not, which we'll explain. So one way that one may become tamei midarabanan is through finding a kesem, a blood stain, and that might render her Nida midarabanan, tamei midarabanan. Therefore, if a stain was found, one, on a colored cloth, two, even if it's something that's white, but it's not mekabel tuma, there's certain materials that are not mekabel tuma, there's some rabbanim that say pads are not mekabel tuma, you have to speak to your Rav. There's different types of materials. Also the size of the material, it has to be like 3 by 3 fingers. If it's tinier than that, even if it's white, it wouldn't be mekabel tuma. Or if the stain is too small in size, even if it's on white, but it's less than the size of a dime approximately, in all these cases, she would be tahar. So always check with a Rav. There's all these different scenarios that can work out. This applies if the kesem, the stain was found on its own, but not in association with any feeling of discharge. If the stain is found on the woman's body, garments or bed linens, there is a possibility she's tamei. And again, therefore, she should never, never, in capital letters, do a bedika at that point. It would only complicate things for her and take away certain possibilities from the Rav to declare it tahar. Other ways, there can be a shayla that she might be tamei. You always say might, but to be aware. If the stain was found at the time they were expecting your period, if the stain soaks the garment through, it's not just a regular stain, or if it was after intimate relations, or if after something was inserted into the vagina area, all of these situations we need to have a shayla asked. There's a ton of detail regarding stains. Anytime you're in doubt, once again, please go to a Rav so he can try to help you. Regarding some of the details, the Rabbanim rendered a stain tamei only if it's the size of a gris va'id. A gris va'id is approximately the size of a dime. The size doesn't matter in the shape. It doesn't need to be round, whether it's in a line or in other kinds of sizes and shapes. As long as the full size of the stain is smaller than a dime, the woman is tahar. And even if the stain itself seems to you larger than size, within a stain itself, there are different shades of color sometimes. So it could be the whole part that's red is much smaller than the dime, and the rest is another color, and you're totally fine. Oh, it looks way too big. Don't assume. You could be totally fine, because in the stain, there are different shades of colors. Not always, sometimes. In other words, there are parts that could be okay, and the part that's not okay is smaller than a dime, and she's totally tahar. So again, don't assume and check with the rub. If there were stains in a garment and they're not connected to each other, it's like a bunch of little ones, you look at each stain separately. As long as each one is smaller than this bris, than the size of this dime, she's tahar. Even if all the stains combined would be bigger than a dime, it's not a problem. Suggestion, if you do notice a stain, you go somewhere and whatever you notice, I mean, if it's possible, I don't know if people are carrying underwear wherever they go, but if it's possible, change, because you don't want the stain to get bigger and then again, create a problem for the rab to be matir. It could be that the way you found it, it's still okay. Sometimes it could be a little issue going on, but it's not an issue to make you tummy. If it's possible, if you're at home, for sure, change. I don't know if you're somewhere else, figure it out. We'll run out to Target. I'll be right back at your wedding. Anyway, so if a stain was found on her body in a place where it could have came directly from her uterus, obviously there's nowhere on the upper body. There are times that it could be a little more strict than a garment or linens and should be checked with the rub. We're talking on the body itself, lower than the uterus, not above, obviously. If someone has a wound on their arm, this is not connected. There's many ways that a kesem could be attributed to outside sources, for example, to a wound. And therefore, it's important to always speak to a rub and explain to rub and explain your circumstances so he can try to help you. As we discussed, a stain on colored cloth does not render her tameh. And therefore, the Chachamim have advised that women should always try to wear colored underwear and colored linens. And when I say colored, it means anything not white. It could even be beige, anything that's not white. However, on the days that she's expecting her period, it's suggested that she shouldn't wear very dark, like black. A color, but not very dark. And why? Because if your period's already starting and you kind of know when that stuff is going on, you're supposed to still be aware and in tune with your body. Don't mask it either. There's no one wants to be in a situation, where they're intimate, whatever. I wore black, I didn't see anything. When you know you got those cramps and it's the day your period's coming or something like that, don't wear black either. Other color. Again, it's suggested, it's better not to. Again, you know 100% not to not, but that's what Rabbanim are saying. We also mentioned the Chachamim don't render a kesem, a stain, if it's found in something that's not makabel tuma, something that's not receptacle to become tummy. For example, what other areas would they consider not a receptacle to become tummy? There are many Rabbanim that hold certain types of pads are not receptacles to become tummy. Speak to your Rav. Floor of the bathroom and the shower, as the floor is connected to the house is not makabel tuma. By extension, the toilet. So being that it's built into the floor, and therefore if someone sees blood in the toilet or on the toilet seat after she got up, it's usually not a problem. So ask, don't assume it's a problem. Blood in the urine is a little bit different, so ask the Rav. If a stain is heavier, where there's a problem with a lot of staining, it can be considered already a mini flow, and it can be a little more problematic. So it's important to speak to Rav when you can be more mako if you're having issues, and when you need to be more machmir to let him know what's going on with you. If a kesem is rendered tummy, once it's already rendered tummy, like we're past the point, like is it not, then it clearly needs the same regular Tara process of waiting 5 days and then 7 days to get to the mikvah. The only difference regarding the stain that's considered tummy is regarding the calendar, which is not a calendar class, but I'm just going to say that you don't add it to the calendar as you would with a flow and you would with a bedika. Stain you don't need to, even if it was considered tummy. Now, in terms of color that's found on either a bedika cloth or as a stain, some are tameh and some are not. The wazim, tuma, and tara is something that the Torah relies very much on the woman, but being that sometimes it needs a lot more expertise to know if the color is tameh or not. So it's important for it to be brought to an experienced Rav. Red and black are tameh colors. Black is not common today. So better bring it to a Rav to see if it's the actual color. Maybe it's like the highest shade of brown. Let him figure that out. Even in red, I'm not talking about like a bright red, fresh bleeding. That's everybody knows what that is. But even in red, there's certain shades. There's 4 shades that they know like that are tameh, and then there's other shades that some women were very pleasantly surprised that were declared tahar. Again, I'm not talking about bright red color, but there's different shades of red. Even maybe it's like a brick. Like there's certain levels of it. Brown and yellow are usually okay. Sometimes there's a problem if there's red in the middle of the brown and yellow. So if you're not sure, bring it to a Rav. Pale yellow, beeswax colors are fine. They've all mentioned in halacha. These are not my colors. Many uncommon colors that are mentioned, like blue and green, are okay. I guess women had stains back in the day. Pink, rust, orange, and some very dark yellows. Those are the questionable colors to ask. A person, again, though, should not try to be machmir. Don't try to be more stringent. Don't try to just decide for yourself. Just consider it tameh. It seems like it's tameh. There's a question there. Send it to a Rav. You might totally be tahar. When bringing it to a Rav, keep it folded inside so the stain color doesn't come off onto something else. And generally, it's important for a Mara. A Mara is something that you bring a Rav to, that it should be seen by daylight. If you didn't manage to, and it's necessary, of course, for stop at night, so of course, bring it by night. Anytime there's a question for a Rav, it's important to make note of the details. When it was seen, the status of the woman at that time, where was she holding in her 17 days, what day of 18 days, give him as much information as you have so he can try to give you the most proper answer possible, help him in the information. By the way, for your own information, I tell all the colleagues, like there's an amazing organization called Taharenu, helps thousands of women around the world who are having staining issues, and also regarding a birth control that causes staining, to help them figure out how to resolve it, to help colleagues set up wedding dates. If anyone wants to write the number, I can give it to you right now. It is 855. You want to put it in your phones. 855. It's an international number. They're free of charge. And when they have, I guess, GoFundMe's, everybody's so happy to help because literally women are sitting and volunteer and they have people running it and they help. And we do so much for so many women. If you want the number, is 855-482-4272. And they have hours. They're in Israel. They're in England. They're all over. They're picking up like many times a day and they'll call you back and they'll ask you your number. You don't have to say your name. Okay, again, 855-482-4272. As we said earlier, the opening of the uterus causes a woman to become tummy, so even if she didn't see blood. Therefore, there are some medical procedures that can cause a woman to become tummy if they use an instrument that extends it all the way into the uterus. If you're not sure about the procedure, that ask the doctor what was used. And this is where it gets hard. Like a lot of times we have doctors here to strongly work that are from. It's much easier. It's if you get complicated with a non-from or a non-Jewish doctor, if you're not sure about the procedure, ask the doctor. Have a clear conversation. What was used and speak to the Rav. General common procedures that are done like pap smears, ultrasounds, a speculum if they use their hand, they're okay, generally speaking, because they can't go in deep enough. If blood was discharged from a medical procedure, one cannot rely on a non-from doctor to discuss it. You need to get guidance and you need to call a Rav. Get as much info from the doctor and nurse that you can. What was the procedure called? What instrument did they use? If possible, try not to schedule procedures that can cause an issue during the Shil and Kim or any days that you need to do Badika. If you need to, then speak to a Rav about doing your Badika before the procedure. Like if you have no choice, this is when the procedure has to be. It has to be. You have no choice. So if you need to, then speak up to do your Badika before the procedure, so that when you come home and you're done, you don't need to do another one. That's easy to create a problem for yourself. Trauma, God forbid, can cause bleeding. If one sees blood after trauma, check with the Rav. Sometimes when the lady is experiencing bleeding or staining at unexpected times, a Rav may send her to a bodeket or bodeket, depending on your accent, to check her and to see if there's a wound or another cause for the bleeding, which many times is totally unrelated to the uterus. Again, New York is so full of these from both coasts. I think the one here is Tolehin Besigo. And the bodekas is a firm lady who is trained and experienced and is able to check you internally. And she knows what to look for. She does not, in capital letters, never paskins like a Rav. She just presents the information with what she has so that the Rav can know for him to paskin. Towards the end of pregnancy, many people are like very curious to know if they're like dilated and where they're holding. This can cause problems. It's very sensitive already at that place at that time, and people can bleed from it. And the doctor can go, oh, saw some blood over there, not realizing he just created an issue, and a woman can become tummy way earlier than she needs to be. So if you don't really need to go to the doctor, and you don't need to get checked and turn on, better not to at that time. If you have to figure out the rub the doctor, but don't just to like, oh, let's have it for curiosity's sake, because again, no one wants to create a problem. Childbirth, as we know, makes a woman tummy. While in labor, she is tahor till she feels like she can't walk or on her own. Without difficulty, she needs to lay down on the birthing bed. Sound like I'm in the 1920s on the birthing bed. It's best to speak actually to a Rav. The smartest thing to do is speak to a Rav that you're comfortable with, like sometime before your due date, regarding like at what point am I needed during labor? Like get that clarity, because it could get very confusing with that. I didn't see any blood. They're saying I'm totally dilated. I feel like I could walk. Now I feel like I can't walk. It's good to speak to a lot of clarity on that before you go to the hospital. Because everybody has their own situation. Water breaking only counts if there's blood in the water. It's clear, lucky you. So generally, what? No. Yeah. So again, it depends where you're holding. If, like we said, if you're at this point, if you're early on and you're totally walking, again, speak to your Rav. You know, there's a lot of different opinions. The way we learned it is no, water breaking is not, unless there's blood in the water. Generally, I guess this is not really working. It's fine, right? You hear me? Okay. So generally, the husband should not be in the room during childbirth. Again, just because we're discussing the ending of Nida here, we're not getting into a whole childbirth situation here. If a Rav allowed it, there's certain situations and certain couples that have their own personal situations, whatever reason, you should turn away and not see her uncovered areas. I wish I brought it here. I made a note and I didn't. I forgot. Maybe another time. There's an amazing article from a non-Jewish doctor who I feel like I'm in class, my girls. There's an amazing article from a non-Jewish doctor, and I wish I brought it here with me, and last time I forgot to bring it. He goes into this whole fascinating article that men that watched, forget about Nida, that watched the woman give birth, most of his patients ended up getting divorced. Wow. They were so turned off. The Rebbe knows, the Halakha knows, the Torah knows, the Abisha knows what we're doing. The women are undignified, and they're also helpless what they can do for them. They were very turned off. It was very hard for them to get turned on again and attracted to them again. I wish I brought the articles. I could show it to you with my hands, and I'm not just saying it. It was so powerful how the Abisha protects us and the Torah protects us. We happen to be Nida at that time. And it happens to be that a man's going to feel like a fool anyway. Like, the nurse, like, you know, your wife and yourself, yeah. Let me say to Hillel, let him down. It's such a sort, and we need so much to Hillel at the time, but it happens to be a fascinating piece. And I'm going to try to get you a copy of it, or whoever wants. And he implored people. He goes, we should go back to like those times where, you know.
Send it to me. We'll give it out next
week. We'll give it out. Yeah. Okay. So we mentioned before that the Torah gives the woman the power in this mitzvah, and therefore the woman has the power to declare to her husband, to let her know when she's Nida and when she is tahor. And for this reason, a woman should never declare herself Nida when she is in doubt, as a joke or out of anger, because that can create a shiloh chas v'shalom. And if she actually does do that, they literally need to go to a Rav regarding her status. So hopefully we're not in that situation, but to keep that in mind. Again, like I said before, anytime you do go to a Rav, it's important to give him context, and the more details you can give him, the easier it will be for him to help you. A Rav, as I said earlier, we could talk about the importance of a Rav Hasiyata Dishmaya. Hashem guides the Rav, and it's so important to accept the answer of the Rav. If a Rav is lenient, don't try to be more machmir. And it's important to come to the Rav as quickly as possible, because as long as you're in doubt, therefore you're being careful as a result of that, and therefore you're keeping Harchakos already, and you're acting as if you're tummy because you're in doubt. It says it's better not to add even 1 extra second, 1 extra day of tumah when you don't need to be in that position. According to the base of Rav, it's forbidden, literally forbidden to remain in days until we're not something that you don't know longer than you need to be. So the second that you're able to, again, if you couldn't, you couldn't. We're talking about as soon as you can. Every answer is individual for you and your circumstance. I think this is one of the biggest things that go on today, of people comparing and people talking and people sharing. What do you mean, Babani was totally okay? He told you that? Every single answer and circumstance is totally individual, and you can literally hear the two exact same stories, which really you shouldn't be hearing. But if you do, and one is tahar and one is tameh. So, and it overrides anything you ever learned in a class or anything you ever heard in a course, because at that moment, that's your answer for you specifically. If there's anything going in your life that you need leniency with, something going on behind the scenes, that you need the Rav to be aware to help you, speak to him before he renders the psak, not after. So he can be aware of what's going on in your life. Just a practical point, as soon as one becomes Nida, you might be somewhere or whatever, text your husband, because first of all, you have a record of the time. It's also important. And second of all, just for simple reasons, you forgot to mention he comes home and he doesn't even know, it could create an issue, it could create a difficulty. So to finish off here, just a couple of points before going to our Harchakos. This mitzvah of Karas Mishpacha and everything we mentioned here is a chayk, like we said, a chok, which we do out of Kabbalah soul. But there are some very interesting benefits that enhance the mitzvah. A marital benefit aspect is that all natural physical pleasures in this world have a saturation point where it's overdone. Anything in this physical world, not in the spiritual world, any physical pleasure has a saturation point that people OD on it, like they get sick of it, they're done. But when it's taken away from them, forbidden fruit becomes sweeter. One of the biggest issues out there in the world is that in marriages is boredom and people needing space. And therefore, just before things get a little boring, she becomes tummy, and it gives that space and excitement, and it keeps the marriage able to thrive and be alive and stay passionate. Even if in your mind you're thinking, oh, like, you know what, I really don't need this today. On a subconscious level, it's still doing it. Also some medical and scientific benefits. The best time for a woman to be having intimacy, it says, when is she most in the mood? Exactly 7 days after her period, mikvah. This is a statement of enormous respect for a woman's needs and how much Hashem cares for a woman's feelings. That intimacy revolves around when it's best for the woman, when she most enjoys, when she most benefits. It leaves a woman with a very warm feeling how Hashem is in tune to her every need and sensitive to her needs. And when it will bring her the greatest joy and when her body's in tune with it. In terms of an interesting medical benefit, doctors did studies on the rate of cervical disease, God forbid, in the world. And the lowest rate was in Israel. And they thought it's because Jewish men are circumcised. So they thought it's less germs for the woman. But then they did studies on Muslim women whose husbands were also circumcised. They discovered the Muslim women were in the same rates as everyone else in the world. They did further research and they came up with that Jewish woman, keep Taras Mishpacha. I'll explain how. This doctor in the UK, Dr. Alexander Gunn, he wrote an article regarding the woman's vaginal canal being acidic normally. And because fluids are acidic, they repel germs. And then when she has her period, she menstruates, the uterine lining is shed, and therefore her uterus is exposed. The fluids inside the vagina then are alkali. They cannot repel the germs. He continues, how long does it take for fluids in the canal to revert from alkali to acidic to protect her? Exactly 7 days after the period, the safest time to have intimacy. He said, because beforehand she is exposed, God forbid, to infection and God forbid disease, chas v'shalom, quoting his words. He goes on to say that it contributes to a woman's well-being, and he says that the Jewish practice of having intimacy 7 days after a period finishes contributes to her good health and prevention of disease. So yes, it's Kabbalah soul, but we see that Hashem has revolved the entire cycle when it's healthy for a woman, and intimacy only takes place when it's emotionally and physically healthy, and it's a statement of extraordinary respect for a woman's needs. So once a woman is tamei, there are halachas of how she needs to be with her husband, which include harchakos, separations. Harchakos means far, but separations. So I'm drinking out of a bottle. I'm giving my students a whole speech. This is kind of rude in class. It's like almost a really small bottle. So try to bring a cup into class. Sorry. Okay, harchakos. We spoke about the concept of a woman becoming Nida, that when a woman is Nida, there are halachas regarding the conduct between a husband and a wife, and that need to be kept, and these are called harchakos. This applies from when the woman becomes Nida until after she comes home from the mikvah. Now, if a woman has a shaila, if she became tamei, so she obviously needs to start keeping the harchakos until it's established that she is tahor. All these rules apply no matter which way she became tamei, whether it was from a period, whether it was from a dika, whether it was a stain that was rendered tamei. When it comes to harchakos, you're supposed to be machmir, stringent, not like what we said before, by regular tumah v'tara, that we try to go to our Rav, and we try, and not to be machmir. Don't over be machmir. Go to Rav, make your tahora. But once you're already tamei, the more careful you are, tava aleichem bracha, it says, the better. It's also important to know that we don't act leniently because of situations that might be quote unquote embarrassing. We don't use the concept of modesty of tznius to be lenient and to avoid certain harchakos because someone might realize and it will seem immodest. Obviously, we try to keep it in the most discreet way possible. We aren't saying it's anyone's business, but we don't skip or not do certain harchakos because we're afraid somebody might realize. Everybody's in the same boat, and even if they're past it, who cares? So you didn't pass, Now, other than a few exceptions, but it literally says that, which is very interesting because everything's very much about modesty and tznius and nobody's business. But it says when it comes to this, don't use your tznius card then. So other than a few exceptions, the dinim of harchakos apply to both husband and wife equally. When a woman is tamei, she's forbidden to have relations with her husband till she is tahor. And therefore, the Chachamim, the sages, instituted certain guidelines to help them during this time so they don't, God forbid, do something that is not allowed. Now, before we get into the actual details of harchakos, what one is allowed and not, it's just important to give it a little bit of context. There's many benefits that come with harchakos, just to mention a few. The time of separation is what gives a husband and wife the opportunity to develop an emotionally healthy relationship. It's not based on physical needs. So what is it just me? Sorry, stop. Sorry. So we were saying the time of separation is what gives a husband and wife the opportunity to develop an emotionally healthy relationship. So it's not based on physical needs, but it's more about communication, respect, devotion, appreciation to each other. In Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, it says, Hischili Akaisi, Rayasi, Yonasi Tamasi. Open the door and let me in, my sister, my friend, my dog, my innocent. That's the exact translation. And this is actually referring to the relationship between Hashem and the Yidden, but it's also the same relationship in everyone's marriage. There's 4 different levels that we want to create with a spouse. Achaisi, my sister. Sometimes our love has to be like a sibling. Unconditional, not letting anything distract or get in the way. And even if there's a conflict, but it will always get back to that natural love of a sibling. 2, Rayasi, my friend. Sometimes a marriage has to be like a relationship of a friend, where you invest, you work on it, and it's not taken for granted like a family member. As it says in Pirkei Avos, to acquire a friend, it takes time and it takes work to make a friendship flourish. And the more time, the more it develops. Sometimes you can go out of your way to make a friend happy. And in our marriage as well, we need to put in time and investment and let it flourish and constantly work on it and make our spouse happy. 3, Onasi, my dove. A dove is known to be very devoted, faithful, and very trusting. This is the emotional intimacy that we need to develop with our spouse. Tamasi, my innocent one, it could also come from the word tam, which is complete. This is the concept of accepting the complete person and everything about them. This is one of the reasons why the kala is covered by the badek. And the chassan is saying, I'm taking my kala. The chassan is saying that I'm taking my wife, not only the parts that I know and that I see about her, but also the parts that I don't see and that I don't know about her. Those parts I will also marry and love. That is what shalom bayis means. Shalom means peace, but it also means shalem, hope. When you accept and love the whole person for what they are, that brings peace and harmony to the home. And during the time of separation, it's a time that we need to work on these concepts, that we aren't distracted by the physical, when we aren't distracted by the physical needs of a relationship. This doesn't mean that in the time that you're tahor, you shouldn't focus on these things. But people do get distracted with the physical parts of the relationship, and the separation time is an opportune time to focus on these other areas specifically. And that will actually lead to the time that when we are supposed to be together, it's very special in the way it's meant to be, with all the complete feelings that were built during that time and the way it's supposed to be. And this is not only emotionally, but also physically. A physical separation, what it does is it creates a very special sensitivity to a lot of physical details and nuances that you're being very careful with. So when you are allowed to do those details again, there's such an awareness, it's so potent, it's so powerful, and we're very in tune to physical nuances even more. So even just like passing, and all of a sudden they're able to pass again, wow, powerful. That's pretty amazing. That's something that the rest of the world can never even begin to understand. And it's a gift that Hashem gave us. It's no secret that people that don't have these times of separation, generally speaking, struggle a lot with keeping the marriage fresh and new and exciting and satisfying, and they struggle to keep it exciting as the years go by. And here the concept of absence makes the heart grow fonder really applies. And that's why it also says when we are under the chuppah, we say, Ila, Rina, Ditza, Chedra, Ava, Achva, Shalom, Bereitz. These are the different levels of love and connection between husband and wife. The Torah is telling us there is an entire process of emotional intimacy to go from one level to the next and to constantly grow in our levels of connection. Another benefit is the boundaries that it creates for ourselves. It allows each spouse their space to sometimes recalibrate. Everyone needs their space and their time, and to not always have the pressure, quote unquote, of being available physically. What ends up happening is that people who don't have this out there in the world end up anyway separating at times naturally, because physically, that's how humans are created. People need space in life. And when it doesn't come from halacha, and instead each partner is deciding when they need the space on their own, that can create friction. That's the opposite of what the Torah is trying to do for us here. It forces us to both separate at the exact same time, so on the exact same page, and it creates the yearning by both spouses to then come back to each other at the same time. One of the most special benefits is the brachas that it brings into our home, which was mentioned a lot by Rula and Verleah, that as we know from what the Rebbe told people again and again, and it's brought down in many places, that by keeping the dinim of Taras Mishpacha properly, it brings tremendous brachas into our home, ourselves, and our children. An example, as it was mentioned, that Mimerchak Tavilachma in Eishes Chayil, from afar she brings her bread. It can be explained that Mimerchak is the same shoresh as Harchakos, then the schus of her keeping the Harchakos properly, she brings the bread, the bracha parnasa, into her home. The Gemara also writes that parnasa in the home comes in the schus of the woman, and many other sources that bring down the concept of how many schus in the house in general, not just parnasa, shalom bayis, children, nachas from the children, any brachas that we need, a lot, and again, it's written in so many places. The Rebbe kept stressing it, how it comes through us keeping Taras Mishpacha and Harchakos we're speaking about now in general, and Taras Mishpacha in general, of course. Everything we're going to mention now from Harchakos is Shulchan Aruch. It's from Halacha. It's from the Shulchan Aruch. It's Halacha. It's not just a chumrah, a stringency that we accepted upon ourselves, but some people choose to keep more, some people choose to keep a little less. It's not what Harchakos are about. Now, obviously, all of them are very, very important and need to be kept. But what's asur min haTorah mitzad harchak mitzad where it says loisikrav, that a man should come close to his wife, what does that include? The issue from the Torah is intimate relations and anything connected with that intimate sexual relationship, such as kissing, hugging, sensual touch, etc. The rest of our chakras are from the Chacham, and we keep it just as strictly. Why am I mentioning, though, a difference then? The reason I'm mentioning the hierarchy at all of what comes in Torah first and then I said the Chachamim is in case one is not being as strict or as careful in Harchakos, they shouldn't think, if I'm passing, I can hug too. It's not the same. There's a different category, but still we have to now kind of put that aside and still know that we keep it just as strict. Theoretically speaking, husband and wife would have the laws of yichud, which is Nida, but it would be impossible to live that way. And so the Chachamim applied Harchakos to create protections. There are some different opinions, though, regarding some of the halachos I'm going to say. But generally, this is the way we keep it. There could be some that have a different opinion, but pretty close. Number one would be called frivolity. The Shulchan Aruch writes that a person should not act in a lighthearted and frivolous manner when she is coming, which means they don't speak to each other in a way that will lead to intimate conduct. strong words about her beauty, sensuality, very strong words of love. You know, there's a basic I love you maybe that people need for their day-to-day life. And then there's like other types of languages of love, reminiscing about times of their physical relationship together. All of this is a concern that it's going to bring out a very strong Sahara by the husband, which could lead to conduct that is not acceptable and allowed at this time. So you don't want to make it difficult for him. Some places can hold that certain games fall under this category. Games that are flirtatious like games that bring out this frivolousness together. We're not talking about a board game or a mind game, even though some say there's something called intellectual intimacy as well, but that's a whole nother, maybe ask a Shiloh if you're not sure. If you're feeling all whatever from an intellectual game, ask whether you should play that game. So that's why there's a thing about learning together, actually. You know, that also falls into the category, you know, if your husband's helping you prepare maybe a speech or class and you're just like stressed about it, maybe. But if you're kind of learning together, and that creates a lot of that kind of feeling. There's an Indian about not doing it. So number 2 is touch. They're not allowed to touch each other even lightly, like with a finger. That includes some touching her clothing or her blanket that is on her, that is around her. Therefore, they should be careful when walking or sitting together not to be too close that her clothing touches. He may handle her clothing which is not on her. Blowing is another form of touch, so he may not blow dust or dirt off of her. Number 3, passing and throwing. We're not allowed to pass or throw an object to each other, even if it's long like a broom, but instead put it down and the other one will take it. I'm sorry, it's just really distracting. I'm so sorry. We're not allowed to pass or throw an object to each other, even if it's long like a broom, but instead to put it down and the other one will take it. They can't hold something in the same vein together, like lifting a table, even opposite ends, like picking up the table together or folding a tablecloth. Even a fire that she's holding, like a match, you cannot light a cigarette from it or a candle from it. It's the same with like a stroller. Instead of pushing it to her directly, better for him or her to let go and let the other one take it. One cannot pass the baby to the other one. Therefore, if a woman is Nida, if she's Nida, she cannot act as Spalter by a bris. As we know, the wife Spalter brings the baby to the men's section to her husband, who takes the baby from her to bring in. The only way they can do it is if she passes the child to another person to pass to her husband. This is not going into this now, just as a side point. The minhag Beis is never to pass in public ever. That's a very, very, very high level. And we're not going to get into it now. It's another discussion, but this way nobody ever knows anything and never leads to issues. It's a certain level that certain people to always act like this in public, no matter what. Nobody ever knows what's flying. We're not even talking about affection and touch, sensual touch in public. We're not even talking about. We're talking about Harchakos, passive. It's a very high level, and I'm not saying it has to go home and start doing that. It's just mentioned it's minhag Beis Rabbi. There's an inyanim of people that do it. Number 4, touching an object that's on the other person. They may not touch an object that's on the other person. Therefore, the husband shouldn't take something out of his wife's pocketbook when it's on her. He cannot feed the baby while she's holding him. However, if it's a big necessity, giving medicine to the baby and so on, or something that won't leave them touching, it can be done. You could place the baby or an object on the bed or the couch that she's sitting on, provided that it won't cause her to be moved by that bed. There's this possibility that if she's like having a blanket wrapped around her and she's putting the baby on the flat sheet of the bed and not on the blanket that's wrapped around her, that's fine. The blanket's like her clothing around her. Putting it on the bed next to that is fine. Next point is any areas of her body that are usually covered for reasons of modesty he cannot look at. And that includes even through a mirror or see-through clothing. Therefore, the wife should always be careful the way she walks around the home at that time, not to put him in a situation where it causes him to see her like this. Generally, people have this question to them, like, how do I walk around my home? Like, on one hand, it's my husband. Like, what is the rule that I can keep in my head to follow that keeps it like clear? So generally what we say is that a woman, she's dressed in her home at this time, the way she is dressed in front of other men. The only exception, and I heard a difference of opinion on this, but the way we learned it is that it's fine, is in terms of pajama pants, because a lot of women, that's for comfort. It's not provocative lingerie. It's like comfortable sweat. There are people that I heard in the past who gave this course and said no pajama pants. We learned that it's totally fine. You can tell college that it's fine because this is the way they wear pajamas. This is what they wear. They wear full pants, comfortable sweatpants. It's not provocative. It's not body showing. It's not lingerie. It's nothing that's, it's so her usual mode of sleep that and that covered, and she's fully covered. This includes, of course, the hair being covered at all times is considered erva. hair covering in general, even when one is tahar, is a whole nother topic. You want to come back, go back. A husband, the next one's a husband may not hear his wife singing, even if she's together with other people, if he can hear her voice. Again, showing the power of the woman's seductiveness. Instead of looking at like another oi, look at your power. And she can be lenient if necessary, like in singing to a baby and so on. And again, I'm sure you all heard his voices and on tune. The next one, sleeping in the same bed. They cannot sleep in the same bed, even if it's a very large bed and they're on opposite sides, and even if both are fully dressed. Keep this in mind in hotels. There are people that run into problems. Something happened last minute and they have to reconfigure. No husband wants to be put into some tiled floor. So that very important, seriously. Some people just took a thing upon themselves, no matter when they go, even if I'm Tahira. And now I'm just gonna say again, this is not under this topic, a whole nother discussion under the class of intimacy regarding sharing one bed versus two beds, when and how often and how not. And that's where someone will always get you there in the hotel, especially because people run into problems. And it's just not a fun situation to be left in. So it's just a good thing to keep in mind. If you don't want to be in two beds all the time, no problem. If I feel like it's worth maybe ordering that, reserving that. Even if sleeping on two separate beds, the beds cannot be touching each other. There has to be something in between, or else it's considered like one bed, like a night table. Even if the beds are separate, but they share one headboard, it's not allowed at this time. However, if the beds are not side by side, this is not something I really understand so much. It sounds more like it's from the olden days, like the beds were lined up. There's touching no room in the bedroom. So there's one bed lined up on top of another, or you go to somebody's house. And this is the kind of guest room that they put you in. It's a small room, and instead of having one bed side by side, it's lined up vertically. In such a case, it says because they're not side by side, you don't need to have like a night table in between them, just a small space in between is enough. Not common, but it's mentioned. The husband is not allowed to sit or lie on his wife's bed, even when she's not in the room. Again, every single one of these Harchakos is because these are actions that can lead the husband to have a much stronger Yitzhahara to actions that he shouldn't do. So be flattered. Don't take it like, oh. However, the wife is allowed to lay on his bed when he's not in the room, and she can sit on his bed even when he's in the room. Lying down is more of an intimate look. It's more of a seductive one. So there's a difference between sitting and laying down. This applies to the bed that they use exclusively for themselves, like there's his bed and her bed, but couches, beds in other bedrooms, which isn't their exclusive beds, the husband can lay on them even if the wife laid on them at other times, because it's not their exclusive bed. If she's out of town, he can sit on her bed, but he cannot lay on her bed. If they want to switch beds, they decided like we need to switch beds. So do it when she's not coming. Not all of a sudden when she's coming, it's a little too late. All you need is one night. The night before is not, but just do it when she's not coming. Even if they did only one night, it's enough for the switch. Now, a person is not allowed to prepare the other one's bed for sleeping in the presence of that person, because the Chachamim ascertained that that can provoke intimate feelings, like to pull back the covers for them to go into bed. There's something intimate about that, getting their bed ready for them. But it doesn't apply to making a bed in the morning, because that is a murdering task. The next one, sitting on the same bench. They cannot sit on the same bench if it will move while they sit on it. If it's a hard bench, when one sits down and the other one will not feel it, it's okay. The same applies with a sofa or a car bench, that when one sits down, the other can feel the movement. They cannot sit together. Today, most cars are very different. I don't know if you remember the cars we grew up with, but today the cars are very different kind of benches. And also, like we advise our colleagues, when they're getting married, like we buy a couch with 3 sections, not one long one, and gorgeous couches with sectional, with different pillows, and you don't need to get that one long, but it's just helpful for them to know. And if there's someone in between them, some say it's allowed, and therefore it can be done when needed. Be especially careful on airplanes, and if you're like on some coach bus, so these things can be very tight. Some will tell you to get even not seats next to each other. Some are not, can't do that. It's hard because you're sitting right next to the person. It's very, very hard not to touch. So you have to keep that in mind. So some will not, they get aisle, or hopefully our middle seat's empty and you get the 3 rows, or whatever. Okay, traveling together. You cannot travel together when the excursion itself is the point of the trip. Just to spend a drive together somewhere. But if the drive is getting you somewhere, even if the place is a vacation place, that's okay because there's a destination. Taking a walk together is okay, but try to avoid walking together if you like very intimate gardens, certain kind of mountains. Again, all alone. It just can bring that intimate feeling. Save it. Just save it. Take your exercise walk down Beverly, wherever you live, Pico. That's not very romantic. So, number 10, hecker, a reminder. When a husband and wife eat together, they need to put a hecker on the table. A reminder to remind them that there are many halachas that apply to this time that they're in right now that they need to keep, and that it's a very unique time and not to develop intimate feelings between them. Are the people getting insulted with the Pico thing? No. Oh, okay, just checking. What? I said Beverly too. I was very fair. Okay. So they need a hecker to remind the time that they're in and that it's a unique time and also not to develop intimate feelings between them. So there's a few ideas of a hecker. One, an item that is not usually found on the table. It should be obvious to them. It doesn't have to be obvious to anyone else. It should catch their eye. It shouldn't be totally flat, at least approximately like the height of a loaf of bread. Or a spouse can eat on a placemat or a napkin, as long and you can put it under the plate, and that can be used as a hecker as long as it can be seen. In other words, you're both. This is if you're both on the same table. Obviously, if you're in the kitchen, he's in the dining room. We're talking about being at the same exact table. Now, let's say one of you's eating and you have a tablecloth under your thing and he doesn't. So again, then you're fine because you're not on the same exact table stretch. A good suggestion is that, some opinion told that if they have a set place at the table and one of them changes his place, that can also be a hecker. We don't generally rely on this opinion. A good suggestion is a really nice pitcher or a napkin holder or vase that's only used for that time. Nobody would suspect anything. It's gorgeous. But you only take it out at that time. Maybe just go buy something after this class. I think I'm gonna do that. So a hecker is only required if both spouses are eating. Obviously, if one of them is eating alone, there does not need to be a hecker. Even if you have a hecker, you cannot eat from, even if you have a hecker, you cannot eat from the same plate, like a bowl of French fries or popcorn. Each one should put into their own plate. If you're eating out and you're with other people and you're not right near each other, it says you might need a separate hecker so each one, because you can't see the other one. Some Rabbanim say if there's more than 2 people in between, you would be fine. Then you don't need, you have to ask your Rav in your situation what you need to do. The next point is eating from her leftovers. A husband cannot eat from his wife's leftovers after she's done eating, but she can eat from his. Exceptions are, he can eat from his wife's leftovers if she's not present, number 1. Number 2, if the food and drink was transferred from her plate and cup to another plate and cup. Number 3, if someone took from her food after she finished eating, then he can take after that person because now it's not considered hers anymore. Number 4, even if he did not know that she ate or drank from it, obviously she doesn't need to tell him. This applies if the food is all in one piece, but if it's a few slices of meat on a plate and she ate from one of them, he can eat the other ones that she can touch, the same as if she cut a slice off a loaf of cake or a loaf of bread, he can eat from the rest of the loaf. It's not her leftovers. The next point is most standard household activities a wife can do in front of her husband, for example, setting a table, preparing food, her pouring him a drink or placing food on his plate in front of him is not allowed. If she puts it on a plate in a different room, like in the kitchen, and then she brings it into the dining room, it's okay. She does it either with a shinoi, like the shinoi means something different. So maybe with her left hand, or if you're lefty, maybe with your right hand, or don't place it right in front of him. So if you didn't do it with the shinoi, that's fine. You can bring it, but don't put it right in front of him. Move it a little off center, off to the side. Again, in terms of a drink, it also can be poured in the room where he is, but not directly in front of them. Pouring water is not a problem for both. If someone is pouring a few cups for everyone at the table, it's not a problem. One of them can be passed to the spouse. Same with serving plates, these buffet type of plates, it's fine. It's not served exclusively to him. His wife can, we say can and can't, it's not clear, so can send food and drink to a spouse with a messenger. Like if you're at a wedding and you've got this really great juice or soda and you see your nephew there, hey, bring this to my husband. So you can send a glass, you can send a drink with a messenger, except for a glass of wine or other important high-end, what we call chashuva, like beverages, alcoholic kind of drinks, and especially be aware by Kiddush, don't pass it, he shouldn't pass it to her through someone else, because again, that's wine. So we call it like a high-end beverage, and it's in a different category. So high-end beverages a husband cannot send to his wife as they are endearing. Some say he's allowed to give gifts to his wife if it doesn't bring like a major level of closeness. There's some people that are really sensitive to it and really, their birthday comes out at this time, the anniversary comes out at this time. There's room to be lenient and to check with the Rav. Flowers for Shabbos is always okay. It involves honoring Shabbos. One may not bring water to a spouse to wash up, and therefore they cannot prepare a bath for the other one. However, if the spouse is not present, then you are allowed to prepare the bath, even if they're aware that you're doing it. Preparing neged also for a spouse is always allowed. When a man is ill, God forbid, to the extent that he's very weak, to the point that he cannot have relations with his wife, then the wife may assist him. For example, to stand up, to lie down, passing something, putting on shoes, etc. But to try to avoid touching directly, but should be through clothing. This is again if no one else can help him. If the wife is ill, it's not as simple in terms of him assisting her. Again, if there's no one else around, then he can. Obviously, if it's an urgent matter, and I say obviously like right away in capital letters, she fell down, or God forbid, if she's wounded, not even a question. Don't be a chassid shaita and immediately help her and not waste time trying to find someone in the street. One can push a spouse in a wheelchair if no one else is available to do it. Some women have a custom that during the actual period, they do not go to a cemetery. This is not a harchak with a husband, we're just finishing with the point here. They don't go to a cemetery, but one can act lenient if it's of great significance to her.
Is that also during the Shivat Hakim?
Shivat Hakim is not the same, that's fine.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Yeah, no, if she's actually bleeding.
Fine.
Some have, a custom, but if it's a great significance, this is the only time you're gonna be there, there's room to be lenient, and you can ask a Rav, like if you are in New York and want to go to whatever it is. Although the Shulchan Aruch mentions restrictions regarding a woman going to shul during her period, the Alter Rebbe said to hold that she is able to go. Shulchan Aruch says it's with difficulty. The Chachamim permitted women to wear jewelry and makeup during Nida. Therefore, a woman should minimize perfume, jewelry, and makeup when she is Nida, because halachically he cannot smell perfume in her because it could bring out those erotic feelings. Some save it, and some actually have maybe like two different kinds. Maybe they have like a basic kind that they just feel freshen, like deodorant, and then there's one that's maybe more sensual for other times. For some, maybe don't. All harchakos we discussed also need to be kept an entire Yom Kippur, also the night of Tisha B'Av until Chatzos, midday of Tisha B'Av. And then anything, so that's till Chatzos, midday of Tisha B'Av is anything that's associated with chiba, with affection, with romance, not regular harchakos like passing. Again, let me make that clear. The entire Tisha B'Av, you need to keep all harchakos. Also the night of Tisha B'Av, you need to keep all the harchakos until Chatzos, the midday of Tisha B'Av. And anything that's associated with chiba, with affection, with romance, not regular harchakos like passing, you have to do till chatzos the next day, right? So like in terms of laundry, in terms of eating meat, the basic dish was still burning the next day. So we still have to keep things till the next day. So anything with chiba and affection, not passiveness anymore at that point like that. So what does a couple do? They cannot connect, for 12 days physically. How much can we talk about? So it's just, we hear this again and again, but it's something so important to focus on, really to discover other sides to each other, that she's not just physically beautiful to him, but he respects that she has thoughts, that she has ideas, that she has goals, that she has opinions, she could be intelligent, she could be learned, she has a deeper side to her, she has other aspects to her. It's not just about a physicality. And the same for her. It's not just about his looks or about being together physically with him that's enjoyable for her, but she discovers and communicates with him on a very different level. And this increases like a very great respect for each other. And it actually serves them well in their older age when the possibility, I say possibility, of desire, physical desire, might wane. Everyone's different. And what happens is they don't have a problem communicating with each other because they started this from day one. And they discover like these deep reservoirs, and they learn to respect like the deep depth about each other, and so many different sides to the other person. And it very much enhances the marriage, and helps to come actually really appreciate and love this mitzvah at a certain level. And once you see all the Harchakos that the Torah has set for us, we need to realize that from all the no's that we just said, we learn all the yeses. The famous pasuk, Mikla Lav Atashamei Ahem. From all the no's, we learn the yeses, meaning anything we're not supposed to do during Nida, we should be doing in times of Tara. And you can break it down like into the 5 senses. He cannot smell perfume on her during Nida, during Tara. He should know her scent. The same applies with the other senses. He cannot see her in a certain way during Nida. When she's Tahar, obviously he is. He cannot hear her in a certain way during Nida. Now he should. He can't speak to her in certain ways during Nida. When she's Tahar, he should speak to her in certain and very romantic and intimate ways. And vice versa. He can't touch her during Nida. When she's Tahar, obviously he is. From here we learn that all the things that the couple is doing, and so from here we learn that the things that the couple should be doing at the times that they're allowed in all the above aforementioned things, and when they're keeping one way, what they're supposed to do at this time, and then when she's Tahora, they're incorporating everything in this time. In other words, it just brings it all together in like a very beautiful, healthy, and magical and holy union and relationship. I just want to show you something here, and I just want to tell you a short, inspiring, tiny story. I have a lot on like the other topics, but like I know it's late and people have to go. So I just want to show you one thing. I'm not going to go through this. Don't worry, it's very thick. Star Maraza from mikvah.org. Again, you can make copies for everybody if you want. She goes through all the literally from A through Z, the entire ABC, and she calls it the ABC's building during Nida. And literally every letter, it's like so cute. I love it. Like appreciation, acknowledgement, information, attention. She goes through every one of the ABCs of different aspects that we can work on in our marriages without the physicality. And I really like this. Here's my favorite. I just wanted to.
Is it on mikvah.org? Can you download it?
I'll check. I'll let you know. Before, but I remember it anyway, so it's fine. Some of you may have heard it. It was in the news, I think last year from Eretz Yisrael. If you did, I'm sorry. But like there was. Oh, I found it. Okay. To me, this story is like insanely heartbreaking and insanely painful, but so powerful and inspiring. I just was blown away. In the town of Emmanuel in Eretz Yisrael, there lived an elderly couple from Russia, or immigrants who were childless, and they lived there for several years quietly and alone, without any real contact with other members of the community. You know, by the time they got there, they didn't know much. They were older than anybody. It says last year, I think this was written last year, but last year the old man passed away. Except for the small community, there weren't many who knew him, and therefore at the funeral was only a midwin present with the help of the Chaver Kadisha. At the time of the burial, the wife of the departed asked that someone eulogize her husband. Everybody remained quiet because nobody really knew him. The wife said, "No one's speaking. I'm going to speak. I'm going to say something." And everybody was very quiet. She said the following words, and I'm going to try not to cry. She said, "Herschel, when you go up to heaven, you will ask why you did not bring any children into this earth. You explain to them that in Russia there was no mikvah, and by the time we got to Eretz Yisrael, we were too old." And everyone cried. The Chaver Kadisha were so immune to death, couldn't stop crying. They lived very far from the mikvah. It was explained further on in this somewhere else that they would go maybe once a year. They weren't like able to fly. There was no money. So there was a mikvah very far. And she went once a year. And for those 2 weeks they were together. And the entire year till next year, she said, we had one bed. We were very poor. They didn't have 2 beds. We slept with her in the same bed. He didn't touch her for a year. And she said he never had a gate to her to even ask her to maybe do something to him. It's like, I can't even imagine the levels this is at. These were not necessarily even from people, but look how they believed in this and they were still what mikvah was about. And that she said this, and obviously this went all over. And it was like just hearing, I cried when I heard it because it's so painful, it's so powerful, inspiring. And it just should give us like this perspective of where we are today in terms of mikvah and what we have available to us, and to understand what people went through. And again, there's so many stories in the place, it's late, but it's under the mikvah class, and I don't want to mix it up in here. But this was just short enough to bring in, because it was connected, of course, with Nida and so on. And just to realize to have the right perspective and the kedusha and the brachas involved. And it's all about perspective. It doesn't mean we're always going to be excited and happy every day. But we realize again and again, the Rebbetzin Bakasha Nashis for everyone to, we said in the beginning of the class, to keep review at least once a year, the Rebbe asked, and he said that, and again, we're not saying that it means that, but it's amazing that all of you showed up here tonight, late at night. It's such a bracha for every single one of you. It's such a schus for people to show up to this. It's just a schus to come to a Taras Mishpacha seminar simply as a review, as the Rebbe asked us to do it. A lot of you know it, a lot of you are doing it, you are doing it, you're not doing it, you're playing it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're holding in life. Just the fact that you're hearing it again, even if it doesn't apply to you for the next 6 months, is a tremendous schus. It should be brachas to everybody. And for me, it's a schus, again, especially this week, and for my mother, Sarah Shlomo, she bring her and Shema. And just, yeah, it was just a pleasure to talk to you all. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.